Firstpost reports from the world's second largest continent. Hello, I'm Alyson Grange. A very warm welcome from Durban, South Africa. We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on Firstpost. Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. A U.S. federal court blocks large parts of President Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs, shaking up his trade war strategy and lifting markets. The White House vows to appeal against the ruling. China lashes out at U.S. government's move to strip Chinese students of visas, calling it a political crackdown after Trump's administration pledged to tighten restrictions on international scholars from China and Hong Kong. A Sri Lankan court sentences 2 former ministers to decades in prison for corruption and misusing state funds to distribute thousands of board games in a failed bid to boost Mahinda Rajapaksa's 2015 re-election campaign. A Southern African court sentences a woman named Raquel Kelly-Smith to life in prison for kidnapping and selling her 6-year-old daughter. Jocelyn Smith vanished last year and remains missing in a case that shocked the nation. And army chiefs of Thailand and Cambodia set to meet a day after border clashes between the troops of the two countries killed 1 Cambodian soldier. Thailand's Prime Minister has called for peaceful talks. Hello and welcome. We start with the highlight of the Africa Day 2025 celebrations in India's capital. New Delhi threw a diplomatic curveball without calling names. Now on the stage was India's External Affairs Minister, Sjayshankar. He drew sharp lines in India's diplomatic playbook. And this time, it wasn't aimed at China. Jaishankar didn't outrightly mention Beijing, but he didn't have to. Listen to this.
Our engagement has been guided by the 10 principles enunciated by Prime Minister Modi, which reaffirm that Africa's goals and agenda are India's priority. Unlike extractive models of engagement, India believes in an inclusive, demand-driven development cooperation by way of building local capacity and creating local opportunities, ensuring that African countries not only benefit from investments but also develop self-sustaining growth ecosystems.
Extractive models of engagement. That's the takeaway here. Jaishankar was calling out predatory partnerships. It was a reference to China's debt-fueled strategy in Africa. In contrast, Jaishankar pointed out India's approach, and he highlighted how it is committed to the overall development of the continent.
India is committed to the overall development of Africa by keeping our markets open, sharing our experiences with the digital revolution to support Africa's development, improving delivery of public services, spreading education and digital literacy in Africa, strengthening African agriculture, and working with African nations to keep the oceans open and free for the benefit of all nations.
So what are China's extractive models? It's Beijing's heavy investment that comes with heavier terms and conditions. Between 2000 and 2023, Chinese loans are estimated to surpass $170 billion. Ethiopia, Angola, Kenya, Nigeria all owe heaps of money in Chinese loans. In 2023, Chinese loans to the countries in Africa hit a severe year high. And we also have to talk about China's BRI, or the Belt and Road Initiative. It is a massive global infrastructure project which funds roads, ports and railways in developing countries. And the model operates mainly through heavy loans. In Africa alone, the BRI loans have funded billions in construction that has left many African countries deep in debt and pushed economies to the brink of collapse. But these loans come with catches. The contracts often require using Chinese companies, mandatory Chinese contractors, and nations struggle to repay, and when they can't, China seizes strategic assets like ports and mines. Beijing calls it development, but critics have accused it of engaging in debt diplomacy. In short, the model extracts more and empowers less. And that's what Jaishankar was referring to during his speech. India's take is different. It has trained over 37,000 Africans under scholarship programs, expanded its diplomatic presence in Africa to 46 missions, and even set up an IIT campus, which is in Zanzibar, Tanzania. Now, all of these initiatives reflect India's honest intentions. On a day marking Africa's struggles, Jaishankar drew parallels to India's own colonial past. He pushed for Africa's voice on the global stage, including a seat at the UNSC.
Africa Day 2025 is being marked with the theme of justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. We in India can fully empathize with Africa's pain, having been subjected to loot, pillaging and slavery ourselves by colonial powers. While nations of the world have regained their freedom, the legacy of the past remains strong in the global order.
And with that, he made it clear, development should not look like a debt trap. So Chinese loans build ports, but India's model builds trust. And it's getting increasingly transparent who's here to drain resources and who's here to share growth. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Gurjit Singh, the former ambassador to the African Union, joining us live from New Delhi. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador.
Happy to be with you.
Now, among the world's leading economies, it is India that has shown the most interest and initiative to engage with the global south today, with a focus on Africa. Now, it also seeks to leverage its position as a major global actor. How can India take its Africa partnership forward?
Thank you. So, India's global south position owes a lot to its successful development cooperation with Africa. And that is what I call the Harambe factor, the factor of cooperative partnership. So India runs through the private sector, people-to-people contact, and trade and investment-led partnership with a large dose of capacity building. Now, that model is not easy to replicate. It may not cover as much as the Chinese model does, but I think it reaches more people in Africa than any other model. That is why India wishes to take this forward in a modern sense. And what I hear Dr. Jaishankar say is precisely this. Between 2023 and 2024, Africa's FDI doubled from 48 billion to 100 billion. India already provides 75 billion of private sector FDI to Africa. In the last 25 years, Africa's trade has gone up by 5 times. And today, India is among the top 3 trading partners of Africa. Now, this is not incentive-based trade or economy. It is a compatriot-based model. Well, that's why I call it the Harambe model. So to build local capacities, for instance, critical minerals, 30% are in Africa. India just doesn't want to extract them and take them away. India would like to build processing supply chains which will help African countries to build local capacities, have regional trade, and take things forward so that African industry becomes a part of global supply chains. It is this that takes India to a new
Right.
level as we look at South-South cooperation.
Right. And Ambassador, what tangible outcomes or initiatives demonstrate this India's commitment to capacity building and, of course, technology transfer in African countries?
On one hand, there are a very large number of scholarships, which you have already mentioned. There are also several institutions in Africa which India has funded. You mentioned one, the IIT in Zanzibar, which is 2 years old. But there are a very large number of IT training centers in Ghana, Morocco, Senegal, Ethiopia, in Egypt, and many other places. Then there are the vocational training centers. You know, one of our most successful projects is the Entrepreneurship Development and Training Center in Senegal and the Kofi Annan Center for IT Excellence in Accra. Like that, there are many. But I think what is now happening is that private sector investment is bringing in CSR to support capacity building in Africa so that more African can join Indian and other industry as they get trained. This is very important because Africa's median age is 19 and we must skill the young people and involve them in constructive work.
Absolutely. And to what extent are African nations receptive to India's development-centric model of engagement? And how does it influence their foreign policy or economic decisions?
I think in the modern world, everything is transactional. You love one country today till something goes wrong, and then you love another one. But I think India is a constant suitor of Africa. Our relationship is old. We were the first development partner of Africa when African countries became free. The ITEC program was started in 1964, a year after the OAU came into effect. Everybody else with development programs actually came later. What we are seeing now is that African countries tend to see what is in their interest. And they see in India a model of democracy, pluralism, and rapid economic growth, which all of them want to emulate. None of them, frankly, want to emulate China or the UK for that matter, but they want to emulate India. So the fact that India's model is acceptable, doable, and can bring direct benefits to the people make African countries look at India as a benign model. Now, does that extend to fulsome foreign policy strategic collaboration? Well, we see more of it happening on the Indian Ocean coast. Recently, with the visit of the president of Angola, we have seen it also spread to the Atlantic coast. India's large imports of energy from West Africa have given strategic relationship a new dimension, and India's anti-piracy operations have helped Africa both in security and in the economy. So I think this is a good time for India-Africa economic part and other partnership in a fulsome foreign policy sense.
Ambassador, thank you for being with us on Firstpost Africa and for your valued insights there.
Thank you very much. Good day.
Shifting focus now, for the past few months, the African continent has been in the spotlight over US President Donald Trump's unfounded claims of a white genocide taking place in South Africa. What started as a blame game has escalated into a series of diplomatic moves, culminating into a full-blown spectacle at the Oval Office last week. But ironically, Trump's ambush seems to have strengthened South Africa's case. President Ramaphosa has received widespread support within South Africa after the meeting. Now, more African nations and heads of state are publicly rallying behind Pretoria. Among them is Ghana's President John Mahama, who has called Trump's attack on Ramaphosa an insult to the whole of Africa. He recently penned an op-ed in The Guardian where he highlighted key points. He spoke about African unity and how the destinies of African nations are inextricably linked. He recalls how the echoes of apartheid's wrath were felt miles away in Ghana during his youth. He stressed that the racial persecution of black South Africans was rooted in a system that was legally enforced. Now, 3 decades after apartheid's end, white South Africans make up less than 7% of the population, yet control over 70% of the nation's wealth. As per Ghana's president, even today, there are places in South Africa where only white South Africans are allowed to own property, live and work. He rejected the claim that black South Africans are still driven by a desire for revenge, as half of the population was born after the apartheid era. The pain of that period is not fresh in their minds. Mahama also condemned the misinformation and false claims presented by Trump in the Oval Office as evidence of an alleged white genocide. While Mahama may be the first African head of state to publicly respond to Trump's accusations against South Africa, regional bodies have already expressed strong support for Pretoria. Earlier, the African Union condemned the executive order cutting aid to South Africa, describing it as neo-colonial attack on African sovereignty. BRICS, of which South Africa is a member, has also expressed solidarity with Pretoria. The South African Federation of Trade Unions branded Trump's actions as imperialist and racist, arguing that they undermine South Africa's sovereignty and its efforts to address historical injustices. Back at home, South Africans are rallying behind President Ramaphosa after the tense White House meeting. They have praised his response as both dignified and strategic.
What he did, because really those Americans, I think especially me personally, I think Donald Trump, he thinks is a leader of the whole world. So I think what he did, Ramaphosa, to prove them that we don't have no separation in this country. We believe as South Africans. That's why we call ourselves the Rainbow Nation.
Not just South Africans, but people across Africa have rejected Trump's claim and backed Pretoria.
So why Trump is doing this is because he comes from a showbiz background of doing reality shows. And he thinks that ruling America is a reality show. It is not. America and Americans are saying that they are being embarrassed by their president. So for Trump to try and embarrass an African president, I think what he should do is to come here so that we show him videos of white people in South Africa pinning a black man in a coffin and later putting him ablaze. Why is he not showing that video?
The allegations that was raised yesterday for the meeting that they had yesterday, for me, I feel that those allegations were uncalled for because it is like they are bullying the South Africans and also African people.
So while Trump may have believed that inviting President Ramaphosa to the White House and confronting him over alleged white genocide would strengthen his position, the outcome appears to have had the opposite effect. South Africa's stance is now gaining broader recognition. For now, that support is growing primarily within Africa. But as more prominent voices weigh in, it could shape a wider global perception. While memories of apartheid resurface, sparked by Trump's claim of white genocide, The truth is, it is Africa that has been the real victim of genocide, rooted in a brutal colonial past, and one such nation is Namibia. Yesterday, Namibia marked its first ever Genocide Remembrance Day. The country honored around 75,000 victims, massacred or imprisoned in concentration camps under German colonial rule. President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah spoke at the memorial ceremony in the Parliament's gardens. She vowed that Namibia will keep pushing Germany for full reparations.
Justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. This theme is talking to the engagement between the two governments, the Namibian government and the German government, and asking the two governments to conclude the negotiation on genocide, apology, and reparation.
The Namibia Genocide is known as the first genocide of the 20th century. It took place between 1904 and 1908, during German colonial rule in what was then German Southwest Africa. It targeted the Herero and Nama tribes, who resisted land grabs and colonial brutality. In 1904, the Herero launched a rebellion. German troops responded with a campaign of extermination. Around 65,000 Herero and 10,000 Nama were killed, wiping out 80% and 50% of their populations respectively. German soldiers collected skulls of victims, sending them to Germany for racist scientific experiments. They were stored in hospitals, universities and museums for decades. In 2021, Germany formally recognized the massacre as genocide. It issued an apology and pledged around $1.19 billion in development aid. But the money was classified as aid, not reparations. Namibia's president insists that negotiations will continue and any final deal must satisfy the directly affected communities. But descendants of genocide victims say Germany's apology is not enough. They want direct negotiations with Berlin and demand formal reparations and land restitution. Some Herero and Nama descendants boycotted the memorial, arguing that Germany's development projects fall short of justice. They demand that genocide be taught in schools so that more people in Namibia and around the world understand this dark chapter in its history.
What has happened here, because this is the first genocide of the 20th century. This was actually the prelude to the, to the Holocaust. But this is not recorded anywhere. People are not aware of what has happened here to the same level and same extent as some of the other atrocities. So it is a great day indeed in that regard.
As Namibia marks its first official Genocide Remembrance Day, the calls for justice grow louder. For many descendants, the true healing requires recognition, reparations, and remembrance. And we end today's show with a viral influencer. Now, this TikToker is learning the hard way that clout chasing can come at a legal cost. And the crime? Spraying money at a party. Now, we are talking about this person. Her name is Merja Kunya. She is from northern Nigeria, a popular TikTok star with over 1 million followers. She was jailed for throwing Naira notes, which is Nigeria's local currency, celebrating with cash, tossing it, flinging it, or dancing as it falls aground. It's a common celebratory norm. Now, this tradition is followed at parties, weddings, and get-togethers, but it is prohibited by law. The act is seen as an insult to the national currency. Such actions are deemed problematic. For flouting this law, the influencer was sentenced to 6 months. A federal court in Nigeria ruled that Merja Kunyana violated the 2007 law. She was given an option by the judge: either spend 6 months in jail or pay a 50,000 Naira fine, which is just $33. In a twist, she was asked to do one more thing: to become an anti-abuse Naira campaigner. Now, what does that mean? Given her huge following, the judge wanted her to use her platform to educate others on why mishandling the Naira is a crime. The court wants her to post videos, basically turn her page into a campaign tool for public awareness. But this isn't Moja's first run-in with the law. She has been arrested multiple times for her content, which authorities in her conservative home city deem immoral. In January, she was arrested by Nigeria's anti-graft agency. It was again for the same thing. She shot a video spraying Naira notes and posted it. She got arrested and then she was granted bail, after which she vanished and dodged authorities. For weeks, she played hide and seek before she was arrested again in March, and then she pleaded guilty. Since last year, Nigeria's anti-graft operatives have started enforcing the currency law more aggressively. They have ramped up the crackdown and said that flaunting a national symbol can't be a status statement anymore. Celebrities particularly have targeted which critics have labelled as selective enforcement. So Nigeria is setting an emphatic example that currency is not confetti. If you spray it, then be ready to pay for it, even if it's just $33. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.